Hello VR Nation. Hello VR gamers. Hey there VR people. Okay, so I got a little bit of work to do on that intro, not sure how to start things out. This week, I happened to get my Quest in. It was supposed to come a little bit later, but I got it early, which is fantastic. And one of the first things I did when I got the Quest is look up how to install SideQuest and how to get Hand Physics Lab onto the Oculus Quest. If you've watched any of my previous content, I typically use an HTC Vive Pro, and I was really impressed when the Valve Index came out with these controllers here, which, because of the grip sensors here, you could get some finger tracking. And I was blown away at first by just being able to move your hands and fingers. And I did an interview in VR chat with a colleague of mine, and the amount of expression you can get out of using your fingers in VR is absolutely amazing. It's a real game changer because I'm a person who talks with their hands. I move my hands around a lot. I'm opening and closing my fingers. I'm making signals. Subconsciously, I'm using my hands a lot whenever I'm interacting with people. So being able to move your hands in VR is great. Of course, if you've used the index controllers or any controllers with grip, you'll notice if your hands get sweaty, and my hands do sweat, the responsiveness isn't always great. Sometimes the grip will feel off. It won't detect the fingers right. I mean, it's come a long way, but it's still not perfect. That's why I want to try the Hand Physics Lab that just came out. The Hand Physics Lab is brought to you by the same people who created Holoception, which is a really fun game that's available on Steam. I say game, it's kind of more of a tech demo where you can take this little character through all these little physics interactions and puzzles. It's a lot of fun, and I was really looking forward to Hand Physics Lab because I think that hand tracking could make a big difference in how people interact with VR. It actually took me a while to get used to picking up objects too. I wasn't sure how to judge how much force I was putting on objects and how much I had to squeeze to get something in my hand. So when you have a control in your hand, you feel like you kind of have some feedback, right? So in this case, as I squeeze this, even though it's not the shape of the object I'm squeezing, I'm still feeling some sort of tactile sensation, which gives me an idea of how strong my grip is. I was kind of fumbling around trying to figure out when I had a really good grip on an object, and often if things were kind of slipping out of my hands. I also spent a little bit of time just trying to figure out what the bounds were like for the cameras. Because I'm new to the Quest, I'm used to external tracking. I've kind of become really used to being able to put my hands behind my head or over my shoulder or wherever, and I still generally have very good tracking. So the whole idea of having the cameras and having to kind of keep my hands in sight felt a bit strange because I really wanted to put my arms out to the side. So I did a little bit of testing to see just how far I could put my hand, and it's not really that far before you lose tracking. Having said that, I actually asked my wife to do the same sort of experiment without giving her any prep. I put her into the Hand Physics Lab and I recorded it. However, the recording didn't work out, and I can talk about that another time, why it didn't work out on the Quest, the recording itself. But she didn't seem to have very much trouble. It seemed every interaction she was having with the Hand Physics Lab, her hands were already within her eyesight. So I think for the typical user, they're going to be keeping their hands within their eyesight. And the reason why I was immediately testing the boundaries is because I kind of had some dirty knowledge, right? I was expecting to lose tracking and I wanted to see how far it would go. For the typical person, they're probably going to keep a lot of what they're doing within their eyesight anyway, so that shouldn't be much of a problem. But just recognize that in some existing games like, Walking Dead Saints and Sinners and Half-Life Alyx, you just kind of get used to being able to put things behind your head and kind of swing from far back. So that's going to feel very strange for anybody who's going from an external tracking system to a camera tracking system like this. I also wanted to mention this isn't an inherent limitation to camera tracking. It's a matter of where the cameras are placed. The Quest uses 4 cameras, and that limitation is more by processing and cost. There is no technical reason why you couldn't have cameras all around the headset to capture things behind your head. If you could capture things behind your head, then it wouldn't matter. There wouldn't be really a bounds on where your hands are. Adding more cameras could improve inside-out tracking. So the technology of inside-out tracking is being limited by the price point of the headsets that you have to get their mass adoption. That's why you see 4 cameras on the Quest. That makes it somewhat less expensive to manufacture. I mean, if we could imagine headsets with 8 cameras, if we could have the processing power in a form factor that was small enough and cost effective. So again, this isn't a limitation of camera tracking exactly. This is more a limitation of trying to get a good form factor and a good cost in a product to get out to the masses. Egg painting was a lot of fun. I could see a lot of kids having a blast with this. The only problem I had is actually, again, trying to grip the objects. I wasn't sure how much pressure to put into my grip when I was grabbing things. And I had a lot of trouble actually getting a hold of stuff. I've seen other people using the hand physics labs and not seeming to have as much trouble as I did. I have a pretty well lit room. It's got 2 large windows, it's got lights on the top, so there's lots of light in this space. So I'm not sure if it was necessarily a tracking issue. I think I was just having trouble trying to figure out exactly how to grip things. So you'll see I fumble around with the eggs quite a bit. But once you get the hang of it, I mean, it's a lot of fun to be able to interact with them with your hands. One of the things I think everybody should experience is the hand slicer. It's a really awkward feeling when you are in virtual reality and you effectively remove your hand from the rest of your arm. So you're gonna see it in a second where you can reach out your wrist across the blade and boom, your hand falls off, but you can still control it. And I've heard a lot of people talk about just how weird this feels, but the way people describe it, I mean, you just have to experience it because it feels very strange to be moving your hand around and it's not attached to your arm, but it's still reacting. And this is one of the really interesting things in VR is how you can do this change of body and change of shape, but your brain still controlling the items. It gives you a very interesting sensation. So here I'm trying to see what sorts of limitations there are with the speed of activity. In Saints and Sinners, one of the things you do is you can grab a zombie by the head with one hand and you can forcibly bring down a knife into their head, and depending on how quickly you react or how smoothly you react, the knife impact goes into the head. And I found immediately when I was using the hand tracking in the Oculus, if you try and do it too fast, the tracking goes away quite quickly. Whereas I felt when I was doing this sort of action in both Boneworks and in Half-Life Alyx and in Saints and Sinners, you could really move quite quickly and still get good tracking. I understand that this is alpha and the hand tracking is still kind of coming along and it's gonna get better, but right now for most video games, I feel like I would have to slow down a lot of my motions quite a bit in order to do the same sorts of things that I can already do with external tracking and the Valve Index. I'll be honest, I have a bit of a bias towards external tracking. My first headset was an HTC Vive Original, and the external tracking just worked really well. However, I felt it wasn't really fair that I always talk about the benefits of external tracking without actually owning a Quest. Now that I have a Quest, I realized that inside-out tracking is okay. I mean, it tracks pretty well. I saw my son playing Vader Immortal the other night, and he was throwing his arms in every which direction. Once we had the room set up with the right amount of light, it worked really nicely. The problem was we actually had to set the lights in the room to a certain dim level before his tracking was working properly. I never have to change the lighting in my rooms for external tracking. It always just works, except when you have windows. So large windows, reflective surfaces. So far, I'd say I am actually really impressed with Hand Physics Lab and the hand tracking in Oculus. It's fun to use. It's really intuitive. There is a tiny bit of lag when you move your fingers and we actually see something happen. The lag isn't that bad. I was expecting it to be a whole lot worse than it was. So that was a pleasant surprise. The hand tracking was good. I definitely couldn't see myself using this sort of hand tracking in a game like Saints and Sinners, especially when you're limited by how fast you can move your hand before you lose tracking. Where this would really shine though is in a sort of environments where you're training someone how to do something and your hands are always within your visual range. So if I were working on electrical or working on plumbing or doing some kind of mechanical work, odds are I'm typically looking at my hands. So my hands are usually in my field of view. The fine motor movements might be a little bit difficult because of the lag, but in general, as long as you're looking at your hands, you got a well-lit area, you could really demonstrate a lot of cool stuff in VR for training purposes. So I think there's definitely a business fit for this. I'm just not sure if it's ready for fast-paced video game type activities. A huge thank you to HoloNautic for building this. This is really cool stuff. I'm so happy they made this available on SideQuest for everyone to try out. It is an absolutely amazing experience. You should try it out. And really, any criticisms I might have are minor because this is a big leap in how we might see VR in the future. So I'm sure eventually hand tracking is going to be the way to go, whether it involves some sort of haptic gloves for tactile feedback or not. We have to get to a point where VR can recognize and track body parts. This is, fundamental for improving interactions in VR and making them more lifelike. If you're enjoying this sort of content, you can hit the like and subscribe button. Over the next couple weeks, I'm going to be doing more of these videos. I want to get back into doing some full body tracking. I haven't taken out my HTC trackers in a while. Now that my space is done, I want to get back into exploring what you can do with full body tracking. That's when you have a tracker both on your belt, your left foot, your right foot, as well as your in-hand trackers. I'll also be jumping into the Echo Arena tournament this week. There's a tournament for rookies on the 13th and 14th of May. So that registration is available. I'm going to put that registration down in the comments as well. If you haven't played Echo Arena, it looks like a lot of fun. I've only played a little bit, but now that I have the Quest, I want to get back into it because having a tether-free headset, I think would be a lot of fun in Echo Arena. So I'm going to join that tournament this week. I'm not sure if I'm going to stream it, but if you get a chance to check it out, I really encourage it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in virtual reality.